Due to the geopolitics of India and the United States, the Dalai Lama was more or less muzzled from speaking to the global public until after Mao and Zhou passed away, only finally getting a visa to the US in 1979 from Jimmy Carter's wish to honor his own human rights agenda. That period of relative isolation in the 70s, however, was a really valuable time for the Dalai Lama, where he came into some of the most profound insights and personal transformations that the Tibetan education system cultivated. He became a true psychonaut and really learned how to walk his talk in every respect. And he subsequently manifested the pedagogical skills and the personal presence that inspired his people and endeared him to non-Tibetans who began to seek him out. I personally can testify that, since I spent a year in PhD research in 1970-71, in which I worked a lot with him on some subjects and texts and things. And then again, I had a long gap of several years, where I then spent another year with him in 79-80. And I mean, with him, nobody lives in a bunk with the Dalai Lama, but you see him frequently every week and so forth, and work on some project. And by 1979-80, he really came into his own. He was like a different kind of presence. But wonderfully, even though he was like that, he also was completely ordinary and flexible and resilient in his identity, where he didn't act all pompous and high and mighty and holy and sanctimonious at all. He was completely amusing and normal and ordinary in a marvelous way. And so this I can testify to, how the 70s were very valuable to him personally as a simple Buddhist monk, even though he wasn't able to execute his job as a Tibetan outside of the Tibetan community and the people in India very much. He a little bit went to Japan, to Thailand, and to Europe, but not to US and not worldwide. His growing popularity in Europe, the US, and Australia, primarily due to his walking his talk with a sustained nonviolent response to the invasion and ethnocide in Tibet, led to his nomination for a Nobel Peace Prize several years in a row in the late 80s, but always blocked by people worried about, disturbing China, and disturbing China's sort of modernization or something like that. But until he finally was awarded it, they broke past that block in 1989 in the Nobel Committee, after China's oppressive behavior was revealed to everyone in the Tiananmen Square massacre, perpetrated by none other than our old buddy, the very same Deng Xiaoping, who, as few people know, but you do know, led the campaign from the 50s on to conquer and assimilate Tibet, and considered the acquisition of Tibet for the Chinese motherland, making China into more of, as Henry Kissinger calls it, a continental nation or a continental power, to be his great life's achievement. And therefore was very unrelenting in dealing with Tibet in a hardline manner. Since becoming a Nobel laureate in 1989, the Dalai Lama began traveling the world more easily. The Berlin Wall went down, which he went personally to witness. He was so thrilled about it. The USSR retreated from Eastern Europe and became the Russian Federation. Outer Mongolia became free. South African apartheid crumbled. And the world expected China also to transform by allowing Tibetans, the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, and the Inner Mongolians a greater measure of autonomy, and their own people beginning to develop the skill of democracy, which actually the Taiwanese people demonstrated conclusively during that period, that Chinese people are highly capable of democracy. They're able to be pluralistic. They're able to speak up as individuals. They are not at all this kind of conformist group of people that the Singapore social philosopher and dictator Lee Kuan Yew and also some communist types say. Chinese, they don't need democracy. They don't need that. They're too chaotic, or they just need to be bossed around. That's false. They're just like every other person and like us, and they like to be free and have fun. And they're also hard workers, and they're brilliant, genius people. But they do better when they're allowed to exhibit their skills freely without being socially oppressed. In the meantime, like everybody else, the Dalai Lama kept on speaking out, asking for a reasonable dialogue, giving up Tibet's history-based, self-determined right for freedom, which caused a lot of distress to many Tibetans who were more nationalistic and more upset. But he did it in exchange for a genuine autonomy within the Chinese Union. still awaiting a positive response that was not forthcoming from Deng Xiaoping. Then again, Jiang Zemin, another 10 years when he was head. Then Hu Jintao for another 10 years when he was head. And now Xi Jinping has been head for 6 years and still no change until today. But nevertheless, the Dalai Lama welcomes Chinese rising prosperity and power. He keeps asking the leaders to show responsibility and practicality, feeling more self-confident that they can allow their own Chinese people and their minority nations, as they used to call them, or ethnicities, their minority peoples under their control, more freedom and more social progress, which will make them more happy and voluntary and creative members of a prospering Chinese union that will become, of course, one-fifth of the world's population, as the Dalai Lama likes to say, and should be a major force and a major presence on the planet as a great power or a great people and a great nation. And he wants them to do that, and he knows they will not do that until they have been responsible and practical and learn to have a more what is called loose reins way of dealing with people.